On this episode, I welcome Daisuke Nakahara of Microsoft. Okay, to start off, let's talk about you. Can you introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and where you are located?
Hi, my name is Daisuke Nakahara. I'm originally from Japan and moved to the United States, 20 some years ago. At Microsoft, I work with our so-called partners and kind of like a customer, but we build IoT solution together. So my job is to work with them, solve their problems, design their solutions, and get the IoT solution in the market.
How old were you when you first got interested in technology?
Well, that was my college years. Back then, I was a exchange student from Japan. I lived in Michigan, and those days we didn't have SNS. We didn't have internet. So the only way I could communicate to my parents and family were phone. And phone bill was very expensive those days. Making an international call to the Japan was super expensive. So I met some friends, and they kind of taught me how to use computer to send messages. Right? It's before email days, but there were way to send a text message, and it took about 48 hours for me one message to get from the States to the Japan. So that got me into this is super cool. It's cheaper and it takes time, but things will get better. So that's how I started, showing the interest in the technology. But I was a business student, so it was more like a hobby for me. I never thought it would be my job, but you never know, right?
So I've heard you've invented so many things that we use in our house every day. Can you tell us about some of those inventions?
Well, probably the most interesting thing was I made fridge a little bit intelligent. Right, so a fridge, you open the door, you put milk and your fruit, and keep there. But when you are outside, it's like it often occurred to me like, do I have enough milk for tomorrow morning? But so we added like a camera and the sensors to the fridge. So whenever you take it out or put it in, the camera will monitor, which items you put in the fridge. So with that fridge, you could tell from outside when you're at the grocery store, do I have enough milk? And then that's the kind of early days of IoT.
Wow, that's so cool. I wish my fridge could see that. That's crazy. Okay. And one of the main things I knew you invented is when we open our laptops and it turns on. It's never something I thought about that was invented. So can you tell us about that?
So I worked on Windows for about 2 decades. And one of the things I worked on very heavily was a thing called USB. These days, everybody knows, right? And the SD card, everybody uses the SD card. But 20 years ago, nobody knew, right? So that was kind of cool, cutting edge stuff. But that's one of the things I worked on. So I'm very glad and fortunate, I guess, to be a part of that team. 20 years ago, I never thought about USB and the SD card become so popular, but now, everybody uses it and everybody recognizes. So whenever I see my grandma, I said, this is my work. This is what I do. And before that, she was like, what do you do?
Well, that's so funny. It's so cool to think you invented things that we use every day. Okay, so you're an IoT architect. What does IoT mean?
Well, IoT is the way to make everybody's life a little bit easier. Sometimes, it's a very dramatic changes, but most of the time it's a very subtle changes. Then most of people may not even realize, they are using IoT technology. But whenever you see like photo or audio or sensor or some kind of data, through your smartphone, typically that's some kind of IoT, right? So in a way, you can think of, tweeting to the SNS. That's kind of IoT, right? So IoT to me is how can we make people's life easier, better, and more convenient using the technology?
Okay, and just to be clear, IoT stands for Internet of Things.
Yes. So there has to be internet. That's a start, right? And devices could be sensor, could be fridge, or could be your PC. Has to be connected to internet.
So, when you have a new idea for a tech solution, what are the first things you do?
Well, typically, these days there's a thing called the web search. So I go to internet, look for like reference or maybe samples, maybe research paper. They got. I'm always like there got to be someone thought about this idea. Maybe they gave up for different reasons, but maybe it was something someone said 20 years ago. It was too early for that person to work on. So I start with the research, then I start drawing kind of big picture in my head, right, and make sure um, there's no easy way for anything, right? Especially when you're trying for new things. So you have to be prepared for different, conditions or options. And if you hit the one, problem, you just immediately jump to the next option. It's, be prepared, right? So it's my attitude, I guess, is more like, prepare for the worst case, but wish for the best cases.
Definitely. And it takes lots of work to build the really cool things you do. And okay, so going back to things like the fridge, how do you invent something that you can't even see? And how do you go from imagining a solution to actually making something that people can use?
Yeah, in a way, your generation is very fortunate. You have everything like from smartphone and game machines and TV and everything. Right? So the time I grew up, I didn't have a smartphone when I was teenager. Right? So I kind of grew up with the technology, like a development, or the progress other smart people made. So the way I learned was just following someone started and maybe learn from other people. So I still keep the same, I guess, habit, right? So whenever I thought about something new and cool and nobody really done it, and I said, well, I it's like a math, right? So there's a lot of difficult formulas, but the basics are the same. So I try to build a block, connect the building blocks with the basics. And the first version may be not very sophisticated, but as you go through and make the more improvement, it gets better and better. So like try try not to be I guess you don't have to be perfect in the beginning, I guess. That's, I should say, right? So start with something simple, something basic, and, you have time to improve in the future, but you have to start somewhere, right? So that starting somewhere with the basics is easiest for me.
Definitely. And when you're in your process of creating something new, do you make any mistakes or what do you do when you make mistakes?
Oh yeah, probably out of probably 90 times out of 100, those are the mistakes. But every time I make, well, I don't know if I should call it mistake, but whenever there's a problem or mistakes I made, I said, well, let's learn from it. Just try not to repeat the same problem, mistakes, and also thought about give a little bit extra time to go through and think about why I made that choice. Right? I thought that was the best option, but it turned out it's not. But there has to be a reason. It could be something in my head, or it could be something external. But try to more like a root cause, I guess. Why this happened and what was missing. Then that will give you, extra learning, so you don't, repeat the same mistake again.
Definitely. You can definitely learn from your mistakes so then you don't
Yep.
make that same mistake next time when you're creating something new. Okay, so now let's talk how technology and conservation are working together. So I know you helped invent something that is saving animals. Can you tell us about your part in Project 15?
Yeah, sure. Um, it's applying the same concept, right? Some basic stuff for me may not be basic for you. Maybe too advanced for some people, right? So because this is my job and this is the industry I've been in, quite some time. So I have a more basic blocks, right? Putting those basics together for for simple use cases or simple scenarios are not too hard for me, but it may be super difficult for someone just starting IoT, for example, right? So um, in the very beginning, I was trying to teach people how to do it, how to build IoT solution, how to build sensors, how to build, new cutting edge technology and stuff like that. And these days, it's like information overwhelming kind of syndrome. Everybody knows a lot, cool stuff like AI, machine learning. Everybody heard about it. And in some cases, you have, AI and machine learning built into your smartphone, and you enjoy, those experiences. But very quickly, I realized, well, these people are very smart in one area, but they don't have basics I have. So why don't I, provide my I guess experience by creating something basic and give it to them. And so instead of teaching them how to build the basic building blocks, I can give them like 70% of the basics. And the basic turned out to be, common for most of, conservation scenarios. Well, like you asked me, like IoT, there has to be internet connection, and devices or sensors, will send the data to cloud, somewhere in the internet, and you do something with the data from the devices. That's common for everybody. So that's the area I focused on, and I said, okay, you have to connect the device, you have to send the data. This is the tool I built, and you are welcome to use it. So that's how Project 15 and the open platform started.
Great. And if you want to start off making your own technology, you can go to the Learning Lab and learn how camera traps work, because right now camera traps are the thing that are making a big impact on animals right now. So here's the call to action. So do you think kids my age can learn this technology now so we can start inventing things to mend our earth before it's too late?
Sure. I mean, like, it took me 20 years to learn this technology and IT stuff, right? Because I didn't grow up with smartphone and all the technologies available today. You were born with it, and learned by, I guess, experience or by just doing it or using it, right? So you have advantage. And I have no doubt your generation can learn, IoT a lot quicker than, most of adults. And now, I'm also open for to give you some tips and techniques, so you can kind of make a shortcuts, right? For someone like me or someone who have to invent the new stuff, we have to go through step by step. But you can skip all the things people invented for you, your generation, right? So you can take a shortcut and get to the goal sooner and faster.
Awesome. Okay, so that was my last question. Daisuke, thank you so much for joining us today. And everybody, you can click on the links below to learn all about Daisuke's inventions and the amazing things he's doing with Microsoft. Daisuke, thank you so much for coming here today.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Of course.
Let's go! Kids can save animals. Oh, yeah. Kids can save animals. Advocacy has no age limit.